Welcome to Fantasy FOMO. For those new to the channel, we take a data-driven approach to fantasy football. Our goal is to reduce FOMO by making fact-driven decisions. To stay up to date, like this video, click subscribe and the bell notification. For this week's episode, we're doing a forward analysis. And we're going to focus on using the personalized dashboard feature of the ThoughtSpot product. On the screen, we can see a forward analysis pinboard, where I've pinned a number of previously created answers with a focus upon our key and mid-size forwards. This first chart for each player is showing me the change in points for when their team wins versus when they lose. On the left-hand end, we can see a very large variation for Taylor Walker, Jeremy Cameron, Zach Butters, etc. For when they play in a winning match, they score 25 plus points more than when they have a losing match. Versus on the right-hand end, we can see a number of players, Jarman Impey especially, Robbie Gray, Dane Zorko, Toby Green, where their variation is much lower between a win and a loss. So we can see here that from Toby Green, under 10 points for Toby Green, Dane Zorko, Robbie Gray, Jarman Impey. So this is quite interesting in that we can either look at players from a consistency perspective, where we're not confident that their team is going to win week in, week out. Or alternatively, when we look at the top end, we can see those players that can go very big in their scoring, especially when their team is winning. And the ones that are really standing out to me is Jeremy Cameron, Tom Hawkins, and Patrick Dangerfield, because Geelong hasn't been playing too well, but is starting to now get a number of results on the board. So let's investigate each individual player to identify who our potential top 6 players should be for this year. So we can see for each of these underlying charts, we have the player, in this case Taylor Walker. We've got their average points, which are either the grey or the red and orange bar, and then the delta. So this is their change in the blue. And what I've done is highlight a line at 90 points, and then also an average at 100. So any bar that's above the 90 points will be highlighted as orange. And we can see here with Tom Hawkins, any average for the year above 100 is highlighted in red. And again, the delta is the change between a win and a loss. So we can see here Taylor Walker, that this year's performances to date have really been above the norm. And also his delta has been very, very high. And we're starting to see that in the performances, that now that Adelaide's starting to lose matches, Taylor Walker's points return for Supercoach is getting much less. Then we can move to Jeremy Cameron. So over the last 6 or so years, he hasn't been able to average up in the 100 range. However, what's interesting for me for Jeremy Cameron is that this year, and yes, the number of matches he's played is quite low, his average is nearly 90. But his delta between a win and a loss is, at 61 points. So this could indicate that if Geelong does get on a run, which they're very capable of doing, Jeremy Cameron really might be able to push his average up into that 90 or even 100 point margin. So it's something to look at, especially with his salary very, very low. So let's keep looking at some of the other key position players. We have Charlie Dixon. Again, probably his average points per year is not really standing out at me. He had one good year a couple of years ago. Even this year is not fantastic. Tom Hawkins, for a power forward, is probably our standout. Had a couple of years averaging above 100, and this year is in the 90s. Again, what is interesting is that his delta between a win and a loss has been growing over the last few years. And in a similar position to Jeremy Cameron, who we can just see above, that if Geelong does actually go on a run of consistently winning games, we really could see Tom Hawkins push back up, well above the 100 with his delta. Let's have a look at some of the others. We see Josh Kennedy, really has been declining in average points over the years. His delta's pretty also been getting better, I should say. But, he's definitely, at this stage, is not a player we should be looking at. Joe Danaher is the interesting one. That this year actually, is starting to have a standout year. I think his average points is well up, back to almost where he was for his All-Australian years. But we can see that this is the problem with Joe, that the fluctuations between winning and losing points is very, very high. So definitely a risk. Let's keep having a look. We can see Harry Mackay is having a breakout year, and actually between a win and a loss for Carlton, his variation in points is relatively low, it's just 14. So definitely could be something to look at. Yes, his price has improved quite dramatically, but he could well be sitting in that top 6 at the end of the year. Tom McDonald, consistently over the years, the change in points for a win and a loss to Melbourne really doesn't affect his performance. It's really, I guess, how he as an individual is playing. And this year, he's averaging 90.25 points, so it might be one to watch. Let's have a look at Josh Bruce. So this is the concern with Josh Bruce, is that, look at this variation between when the Dogs win and the Dogs lose of 54 points, but also just the variation through his career. And now let's move on to some of the smaller players. We can see here Toby Green consistently, does average, over that 90 mark. I think what's interesting this year is actually polling more points when the Giants are losing than when they're winning. So again, he is averaging at the moment 96.25. If the Giants actually get on a win, and we can see that in the other years he does traditionally poll more points when the Giants are winning, we could actually see Toby Green's points go well above that 100 if Giants start getting on a roll. Let's have a look at the other sort of small to mid-sized forwards. We see here Robbie Gray historically has always polled very well, but has been declining year over year. Dustin Martin, you can see red bars across the board, and even this year he's still averaging at 92.43. What is interesting this year is, again, that variation between the wins and the losses for Richmond. And so, but if just looking at this, I think Dustin Martin is becoming very, very well priced. Really should be looking at him to get him into that top 6, because there's more than likelihood he will be there at the end of the year. Isaac Heaney, another one of those mid-sized forwards, putting consistent performances around those 95s. This year's had a lot of injury concerns, and that's why he's averaging where he is. But we did see last year that the average points in the wins and losses, when the Swans do tend to go well, Isaac Heaney goes well. Then we can have a look at Dane Zorko, another one of these players that consistently has polled very well, probably in the midfield position in his early career, but in the last few years has been declining. But again, with the opportunities that he's going to have at Brisbane, Dane Zorko probably should be looking at for your top 6. And we can actually see here between his best and worst of when Brisbane win or lose, he's fairly consistent year over year. Let's have a look at a couple more. Let's have a look at Zach Butters. So only 3 years of data, and we can really see this is a breakout year, that he is currently averaging up above 103. But what does concern me is when Port win versus when they lose, there's a massive variation of his points. Josh Dunkley, although he's injured, include him for comparison. And we can just see here, year over year, Josh Dunkley is consistently polling well. His variation is relatively low in comparison to others. Patrick Dangerfield, just been a super coach bull over the years, has been declining, but still averaging well above that 100 mark. Currently only averaging 83, but obviously been suspended and injured. And this is one, I think, just watch this space and buy at the right time. The last two, just have a look at how the King brothers were going. Just wanted to have a comparison. Obviously, this is too early for them. So that's it for this episode. Please leave your feedback and questions in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.